At some point, something shifted. It wasn't a decision you made consciously. There was no moment where you sat down and said, "I'm done." It was more gradual than that, more quiet. One disappointment, and then another, until one day you realized you had stopped leaning toward people the way you used to, stopped hoping in that particular way, stopped making yourself available for something that kept not working out. And now you live a good life. A full life even. You have things you care about, people you love, work that matters. But there is something you have quietly stopped reaching for, and you're not entirely sure anymore whether that's wisdom or protection or something in between that doesn't have a clean name yet. Here's what the psychology actually says about people who stop chasing love, and it's more nuanced than most people realize. Let's start with what the stopping actually is, because it's almost never what it looks like from the outside. People who stop chasing love are rarely people who stopped wanting it. The research on attachment and romantic longing is consistent on this. The desire for connection is one of the most fundamental human drives, wired deep into the nervous system, not something that disappears because it has been disappointed enough times. What disappears isn't the wanting. What disappears is the willingness to keep sustaining the hope that is required to pursue it. Psychologists call this learned helplessness in the context of romantic pursuit, a pattern first identified by Martin Seligman, in which repeated experiences of effortful action not producing desired outcomes leads the nervous system to stop initiating the action, not because the outcome stopped being desired, but because the effort stopped feeling connected to the outcome. The person who stops chasing love isn't saying, "I don't want this." They're saying, "I have tried and tried, and the trying doesn't seem to change what happens." And the nervous system, being the efficient survival machine it is, eventually stops expending the energy. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because learned helplessness in romantic contexts almost always develops on top of something older. The people who stop chasing love most completely, most quietly, most permanently, are rarely people for whom love simply didn't work out as adults. They are almost always people who learned something about love early, that it was conditional, that it required performance, that it was something you earned by being a certain way, and that being yourself, ordinary, imperfect, needing, wasn't quite enough to secure it. Those early lessons create what attachment researchers call an internal working model, a deeply held, mostly unconscious template for what love is, how it works, and what you have to do to get it. And when adult relationships then confirm what that template already believed, that love doesn't stay, that effort isn't enough, that you will be left or disappointed or asked to be someone you aren't, the template hardens, and eventually the person stops initiating because every initiation feels like a confirmation of something they already knew. And here's what nobody talks about. The person who has stopped chasing love often has the most sophisticated and accurate understanding of their own patterns. They know why things didn't work. They can trace the shape of their history with startling precision. They know where they give too much and where they close off. They know the things they're drawn to that aren't good for them and the things that are good for them that they can't quite receive. All of this self-knowledge is real. All of it is hard-won. And sometimes that self-knowledge becomes its own kind of trap because knowing the pattern doesn't automatically mean you can stop living inside it. Now let's talk about what the stopping actually protects, because it does protect something. Research on emotional self-regulation shows that withdrawal from romantic pursuit significantly reduces the specific category of pain associated with romantic disappointment, the rejection sensitivity that for some people is genuinely debilitating. The person who has stopped chasing has also stopped being vulnerable to that particular kind of hurt. And that matters. Choosing not to be hurt in a way you have been hurt before, repeatedly, is not pathological. It is one of the most rational things a nervous system can do. The question, and this is the question worth sitting with, is whether the protection is temporary or permanent, whether the stopping is a season or a decision, whether it is rest or retirement. Let's be honest about something. There is a version of stopping that is genuinely healthy. That is the stopping that happens after deep and honest work. The stopping that comes not from giving up, but from a decision to no longer pursue love in ways that have historically caused harm. The person who stops chasing unavailable people, who stops performing for conditional love, who stops abandoning themselves in the hope that someone else will choose to stay. That stopping is not retreat. It is clarity. But there is another version, the version that is protection masquerading as peace, that looks like contentment from the outside and feels in the quiet like something that has been decided about and closed, that has stopped reaching not from clarity but from exhaustion, that has mistaken the absence of pain for the presence of, okay. Here's what's fascinating about people who have stopped chasing love. Most of them haven't stopped wanting it. They have just stopped admitting that they want it, to others, and often to themselves. The wanting went underground. It became a private thing, held quietly, rarely examined, surfacing occasionally in the way they respond to a certain kind of story or a certain kind of scene, in the specific ache of someone else's love being visible in a way theirs is not. The person who has stopped chasing love is not indifferent to love. They are extraordinarily sensitive to it. They notice it everywhere. They just stop believing it was available for them. And that belief, not the stopping, but the belief underneath the stopping, is the thing worth examining, because beliefs can update. Not easily, not quickly, not through simply deciding to believe something different, but through experience, through the right kind of relationship, the right kind of moment, the right kind of evidence that contradicts what the template learned long ago. You stopped chasing. That made sense. That was the only reasonable response to what happened, but you haven't stopped being someone worth loving. That was never the question. The question was always whether you could find the conditions in which that truth became possible to believe. That search doesn't have to look like chasing. It just has to stay open. Subscribe to Brain Decoded for more psychology that honors where you are while gently holding space for where you might still go.